Speaker.
Alfred Narrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I, first of all, it's my first speech in the House for 2050. Can I say Happy New Year to you? And can I acknowledge also too your marriage during their break and wish you well. Mr. Speaker, I also too want to just take time to acknowledge that while it's been a great start to the year, there's also been a tinge of sadness. I just want to acknowledge my friend and colleague Mike Sabin, who's no longer with us. He will be a loss to the House, to the electorate, and also to, I believe, to the country for the work and effort that he's put in as well for Northland. Mr. Speaker, also too, it is a sad loss, and I know that there have been tributes to Celia Lashley. Can I just briefly just acknowledge her work, the work that she has put into community. I've been part of some of those initiatives, particularly when she's in Nelson, and the work that she did, in particular with Nelson College. It was called the Good Men Project, working with young male students. I myself also did quite a bit of work with fathers and sons and the work there, and I know that the work that Celia had put through influenced a lot of that. When I met her, she came across as quite a tough cookie, took no prisoners in the work that she did, but really she's well respected for that. So, Mr. Speaker, I just think that she's a great New Zealander, and I just want to just take a moment just to acknowledge her contribution that she's made significantly to New Zealand as well. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about the Social Security Amendment Bill, and the previous speaker talked about a brighter future, and she's absolutely right. We are hearing, and I'm glad that she's saying those words in her bright green jacket, that's saying that New Zealanders and our students do have a bright future in New Zealand. We hear it all the time, we're seeing it all the time, and I know because my two younger sons are currently studying in tertiary study, they're seeing it all the time too. They're seeing students that are seeing the opportunities that are coming for them, not only to complete their tertiary studies, and if we talk about completion of tertiary studies, we can see that, and Chris Farfoy will also know this, that for Pacifica, we've got the highest rate of completion that has continued to grow around tertiary studies for young Pacifica students. That's great future for both Māori and Pacific students that are coming through that hasn't been that previously under a previous government. So it is definitely a brighter future that we're seeing, that students are giving feedback to us that's really important as well. So we do keep saying it, we do believe in it, and we believe that the Social Security Amendment Bill, now the previous speaker, Mrs Moroney was absolutely correct. This was back in the 49th Parliament. And during that time, during that select committee, it wasn't a huge bill. It's a bill that has, as rightly said, closing a loophole. And I think that's really important. In that loophole, there are some technical issues there that need to be remedied. That recommendation came through. I think there were 2 submissions that were put forward, and only one of those was an oral submission, and that was the New Zealand Students' Union Association that made that as well. The things that they wanted to put forward inside of that also came through in the regulatory impact report was around ensuring that there was a fairness and an equity around this. And Mr. Speaker, that's what this bill is about. It is about fairness, it is about equity. It closes a loophole that allows some students and beneficiaries to receive varying levels of income support inside this. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that's also important in the provision of the bill is that it clarifies the weekly compensation, which includes weekly compensation whether it is paid by ACC or an accredited employer. We think that's important because the deduction should apply equally to compensation, whether it is paid by ACC or an accredited employer. It is inequitable that claimants in essentially their same circumstances are also treated differently as well. Just to give you one example, Mr. Speaker, if a DPB recipient is paid $100 weekly compensation with no other income, but the DPB, they would have their benefit reduced by $100 if the compensation is from ACC or if the compensation is paid by an accredited employer, their benefit will not be reduced at all. These are just some of the examples I know that came through the Select Committee, and they were talking about, and just around some of the inconsistency that they were seeing as well. Mr. Speaker, I just want to briefly talk about the student allowance component of this bill. This bill doesn't have many parts to it, but there are parts that are important, I think, to people that are listening and also to students as well. The accommodation supplement is intended to assist low to middle income people with accommodation costs who do not receive a student allowance or a loan. A loophole in the Social Security Act allows students to access the accommodation supplement if they choose not to receive a student allowance. Mr. Speaker, we believe, for example, a sole parent in Auckland with 2 children, the maximum amount that can be paid in accommodation supplement is around about $225 a week compared to $60 for accommodation benefit on a student allowance. The returns from study accrue to individuals as well as to society. So the clear policy behind the student loan and allowance system is to share the cost between students. It's important to get those little details right. Mr. Twyford, who sometimes doesn't get those details right, to get those little details right, Mr. Twyford, because it's important to the people that are listening. They need to know that this isn't a large bill, but a bill that has many little technical issues that are absolutely important to New Zealanders as well. Mr. Speaker, what is also important, we think, is a retrospective application of the amendment. By changing legislation retrospectively, we confirm previous understandings of legislative and administrative policy and practice. Mr. Speaker, we believe that the changes that we're making, small as they are, to both the ACC and also to the student allowance, will be significant in what they are impacting to our students as well. Mr. Speaker, I know that the previous speaker, Mrs. Moroney, talked about students and the impact of students, and yet again the feedback that we're getting is that though this is not a huge bill to a number of the students, what they are seeing though is the opportunities that are growing through opportunities for employment, for opportunities that we're seeing constantly for them to further their tertiary studies and also to further their opportunities overseas as well, and that's really important. Mr. Speaker, again, as I've said, the number of Pacifica students completing bachelor's degrees has increased, and just to give a little bit of detail here, from 980 in 2008 to 1,530 in 2013. That's a 56% increase. And I know that Mrs. Williams and also to Mr. Farfoy will relish in that information and that little statistic as well. In 2013, over 10,000 more Māori students achieved qualifications across all levels of tertiary education than in 2008, and over 5,300 more Pacifica students did the same. That truly is an achievement that we think and that we're very proud of as well. That's making a difference. National is committed to increasing achievement in the tertiary sector. Having more people achieving tertiary qualifications means we're moving to a higher level of skilled labour market, higher skills, meaning higher paying jobs for all New Zealanders and their families. Back in the 2000s, we know that previous governments threw more and more money at tertiary education, and the number of people achieving degrees stayed around the 20,000 mark. With a focus on performance and results, we have lifted that now to almost 26,000. Mr. Speaker, degrees with virtually the same amount of funding right across the sector as well. Overall, the total number of qualifications achieved in the year by all students, both domestic and international, remained at a historically high level, thank you Mr. Speaker, at around about 162,000 and more than 20% higher than 5 years ago. Mr. Speaker, I want to just summarise just some of the parts of my speech and my contribution to this bill, the Social Security Amendment Bill number 3. Just finally on ACC, this government is reducing ACC levies. By the 1st of July next year, we will have put around $1.5 billion back in New Zealand families' pockets. $1.5 billion. Mr. Twyford may be interested in that. It's a detail. I know you may not be interested in the details, but $1.5 billion back into the hands of families and to their pockets. All families, Mrs. Martin. This includes reducing the average motor vehicle levies from the 1st of July this year from around $330 to $195 a year as well, leaving more money in your family's pocket. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this bill, though small in nature, is significant. We know that it receives the support. It's a pity that the rest of the speech from the previous speaker didn't continue to be positive about what this direction the government is taking, that it truly is making a difference. We think that the government is in a great space. It's actually making a brighter future for all students. And in particular, I want to speak out for Māori and Pacifica students that are really important. I know Mr. Ball, being part Kiribati, will appreciate that as well. And we're seeing the difference that it's making. The opposition may not celebrate those results. I don't hear them talking about them. I don't hear them talking about and celebrating those numbers, but we do, because they are making a difference. And if they are serious about those students, Māori and Pacific in particular, then why are they not putting out press releases and celebrating what the government is doing, but most importantly, to seeing the achievement results of these students as well. So that would be great. So Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this contribution Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker.